What's the most amazing thing you've seen in politics?
I guess George Bush winning the presidency after his father got booted from office. I mean, if you think about, if you were sitting around after Clinton was elected, and somebody said the next president is going to be George Bush's son.
He wasn't even the governor then.
He lost the House race.
Right.
Talk about a climb. And it isn't all because of the old man. The old man wasn't that popular.
No.
It was him.
No.
And winning the governorship, beating and now I'm forgetting her name. What's her name?
Ann Richards.
Ann Richards. You know, that was a big upset.
When's that duel between you and Zell Miller going to take place?
Well, he's the one that wanted it. All I can tell you is the whole time he was there, my producers and my president of my company were in my ear saying, calm down, let him do it. And he's going to write a book about it. I think it's funny because if you watch the thing, it wasn't a debate. He was just haranguing me, and I'm there going, and he said, I'm going to walk off this set. And then I said, oh, Senator, that would be our loss. That would be our loss. I had a lot of fun with that.
You were very calm.
Thank you.
Chris, thanks very much
Charles.
for coming.
You.
You don't see a lot of political will up on the Hill. I'm not sure how it was back when you were a senator and a congressman, but people say, hey, you raised the cap and you surcharge salaries over $90,000. That's a tax increase. And that type of terminology today seems like it scares all the elected representatives away. Is there political will up there?
There's a lot of phoniness about the tax issue.
And this is a quote in your book: the country is richest, which nourishes the greatest number of noble and happy human beings. And doesn't that sum up your life in this book?
That's my philosophy. It was a British economist that coined that phrase, the greatest good for the greatest number. I want every American to be happy. I'd like to see people around the world happy and secure. We've got to quit fighting these needless wars like Vietnam and Iraq and begin investing our money in more constructive things if we're going to have the kind of secure future I would like to see.
President Bush wants to end tyranny in the world and do whatever it takes. And again, this could last, again, generations, centuries, like he said, whatever it takes. But this could be very expensive. And this war effort, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars, many lives lost. But do you think, how long can we carry on this fight, incurring this type of...
Well, we'll have to carry it on until we succeed. Freedom is not free. We did it against the Soviet empire. People in 1946 and 1947, when Truman, who was one of our really great presidents, said it is our policy to resist the Soviets, people said, how long is this going to take? It's going to take too long. We can't afford it. Well, the American people, under presidents of both parties, stayed the course for almost half a century. And the reward was that we got rid of the Soviet Empire and that threat to us. So this can be done. There is no question this can be done. Americans just need to be patient.
But does it worry you that even some of the Republicans up on the Hill, and I saw a recent quote by Republican Representative Henry Hyde, who said, implanting democracy in large areas would require that we possess an unbounded power and undertake an open-ended commitment of time and resources, which we cannot and will not do. And it seems like Representative Hyde's saying we have to be careful because we don't have unlimited time, unlimited resources. We have to worry about what's going on at home. People say the press is softer on George W. Bush. And one example, and of course you were not at this press conference, you had left the beat, but at the press conference before George Bush went to war with Iraq, no one asked him, hey, what if there's no weapons of mass destruction? What's your plan then?
I think it's much more likely that George W. Bush could go down historically as a horrible, failed president, or much more likely that if he catches breaks in Iraq and that this big bet that he's placed on a new Middle East turns out to be true, that he'd be seen as a really historically consequential president in a way that I don't think Bill Clinton is ever likely to fall into either camp.
Isn't there some type of fallacy here with Hillary Clinton? I mean, she's smart, she's competent, she's well-spoken. I saw her on Meet the Press a while back, and I mean, I've hardly seen a better performance, but she's not Bill Clinton. I mean,
well, none of these people are Bill Clinton.
Right, but a lot of her cachet is kind of that she's a Clinton. she's married to Bill Clinton, but there's quite
Well, that's her biggest strength, and it's her biggest liability.
Mfumi has some personal problems, but also some very well-known black elected officials such as Albert Wynn, Elijah Cummings haven't come out for him.
I agree with you. I think there are some real questions on the part of some African American leaders about whether Mfumi could win a general election.
Your mother, Mary Elizabeth Willis, was a huge influence on your life. She's passed on.
My mother tried to give what she could. She worked as a maid during the day, and she was an elevator operator in the evenings, and she raised my sisters and myself as best she could. I never knew who my father was until the night of my mother's death. I was 16 years of age.
And she died in your arms.
She died in my arms.
You announced you were stepping down from the NAACP. You went to the White House and had a 40-minute discussion with President Bush. What was that like? I mean, your mother would have been dang proud of going to the White House and meeting with the president. You have to admit that.
Well, she would have. She probably would have told me what to tell him to. He called me to the White House a few weeks later. We sat down in the Oval Office, spent about 40 or 45 minutes talking about our differences to get them out of the way, to try to find similarities that we could build on. And it was a cordial meeting. It was a frank meeting. And I think the president will tell you it was a productive meeting from his perspective and from mine. Did I change the president? I don't know.
But Minor, there are state senators in Montgomery County. There's delegates in Montgomery County that actually voted for slots, not in Montgomery County, but they voted for the House and Senate slots bill.
But that's
and
right.
I'm talking Democrats.
And they are, and I agree with Kevin. They're the biggest hypocrites of all.
We elect people to make these hard decisions, but frankly, this 4 years, they have not been able to make some of the hard decisions, and it's going to have to go to 2006, and people will either, elect somebody else for governor or elect more Republicans in the House.
Well, I think it's ironic that the previous Democratic Speaker of the House is one of the major supporters of slots. And had he still been Speaker, slots would have been the law of the land back in 2003.
Even if there was a Democratic governor, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, probably they'd have forced it down.
They would have forced it, yeah.
The Robert Kennedy campaign, and I know he lost Oregon to Eugene McCarthy.
He did.
But what were those last days? And then he flew into California.
Right.
He won that, and then late at night at the Ambassador Hotel after he spoke, of course, he was assassinated in the kitchen. But do you remember back to those 2 or 3 or 4 days and just do you ever think about them?
We knew California was big casino. I mean, we went to California. I was responsible for the Get Out the Vote effort in Northern California, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and that whole area, the Bay Area. And, we knew that was it. I mean, but...
And I'm sure the assassination hit you hard, but... And you after his assassination, Hubert Humphrey, of course, became the nominee for the Democrats. But do you think Robert Kennedy would have got the nomination? And do you think he would have beat Richard Nixon in '68?
I do think he would have gotten the nomination. I think it would have been tough. That night is something that hasn't been written about much. Mayor Richard J. Daley of Chicago, who controlled the Illinois delegation, called Ambassador Joseph Kennedy, who was still who lay really inert. He was a victim of a stroke. But he called him to tell him that he would be with his son.
Two of the most powerful women in the United States, one being you, the other being Nancy Pelosi, former name Nancy D'Alessandro, both went to the same high school, the Institute of Notre Dame. Was there something in the water there?
Well, I think it was something in the holy water.
Isn't this all linked together? In other words, the spending in Iraq, other issues such as the tax cuts. Katrina is going to be very expensive. Isn't this really affecting the good things that Congress can do, such as increased funding for Alzheimer's
Absolutely.
research?
Well, let's just talk about the Iraq War. The Iraq War is costing us about $1 billion a week. That's billion like in Barb, not million like in Mikulski. And I remember Rumsfeld sitting in front of a committee that I'm a member of, the Appropriations Committee, saying, oh, don't worry about the cost. We're going to get it from seizing Iraqi assets in this country or Iraqi oil. Well, we've been at this a couple of years now, and we're yet to see a nickel.
You were UN Secretary before you were Secretary of State. You went back to Prague, and you went back on Air Force One. You came to America on a boat, and you went back on Air Force One.
Well, it was quite stunning because what happened was that President Clinton had authorized that we asked the countries in Central and Eastern Europe to be what we called partner in the Partnership for Peace, which was something before their entry into NATO. And I went there, and we picked up President Clinton in Brussels, and then flew into Prague on Air Force One. And Secretary of State Christopher was so kind to, by protocol, he should have gone off the plane with President Clinton. But he told me to go with the president. And as we went down the stairs, the president held my hand, and we walked down together. And then at the bottom of the stairs was the Czech president, President Václav Havel, a very good friend of mine. And I thought to myself, it doesn't get any better than this, to arrive on Air Force One holding hands with the President of the United States and be given lots of good kisses at the bottom of the plane by President Havel.
Well, you'll never forget that.
Never forget it. It was a great emotional moment.
I think Colin Powell's kind of upset now that it's come out that the evidence was basically not correct. But I think that the president and the vice president needed him. He was somewhat of an honest broker. The world respected him. He was a military person. And they needed him to be the person that made the final sell, I think.
Well, that's what it looks like, doesn't it?
You know, after the last presidential election, I know you spoke at the Democratic convention. Some Democrats are saying, hey, we got to steer the ship far to the right. We have to become more religious. We have to do this. We have to do that quickly. What's your response to that?
I think the reason why we didn't win the national election against an incumbent wartime president is because our candidate did not articulate as well as he could and should have a security policy for the Democratic Party.
There could be a backlash here. There's a minority vote in Maryland, I think it's 35 or 40%, and that looking at the big picture, you know, if the Democrats don't get behind Mfume, you know, the African Americans, the minorities could go towards Michael Steele or not turn out at all. I mean, are the Democrats worried about that big picture?
I don't think we're worried about this in this instance at all, because every campaign, every election is about the local candidates that are there.